The other announcement is that I put a deadline for tomorrow night for a submission of the project, APK. I could give you an extension. I don't really care to send Saturday, but I think you should have the weekend free if you like. The point is not, I mean, this is not graded, right? But it's a way for you to get feedback. So if you can submit an APK and explain to your users, that will be other students essentially, what you would like them to use of your project, this is a way in which you can get other people to test what you have done. You are free to tell me, and in fact, you know, if you have opinions to the contrary, let me know that I should move the deadline. If I put it too late, then you cannot really do much with the feedback. If I put it too soon, then some of you may not be ready yet to have an APK that is usable by others. So it's a little bit of a compromise, and I set it to tomorrow night. Do you feel, raise your hand if you feel that I should move it to Monday night. Raise your hand if you feel that I should keep it to Friday. Okay, now I don't know what to do. I can put it to Sunday night, okay, as a compromise. Would you raise your hand if you think that Sunday night is a good compromise? Okay, so a lot of you. Okay, I'll move it to Sunday night. I'm sorry, sort of it intrudes your weekend. But it doesn't really, because if you would be ready by tomorrow night, you can simply send it tomorrow night and be done with it anyways, right? So it's as you like. What it does is simply delays a bit to the time you have the feedback. Also, another thing that I would really like to ask you, the reviews for homework 3 are in now. Please give a feedback on these reviews, from -2 if you think that they're entirely wrong, to +2 if you think that they're great. Okay, so give feedback on the reviews you have received. Yeah?
Would you be able to see the feedback on the reviews?
Yes, you are able. Yes, indeed. And in fact, you are also able to see the reviews other people wrote for the same homework you reviewed. Okay, that's true also for the previous homeworks. Maybe not all of you were curious enough to click there, but once the review period is over, you can click and you can see what other people said on the same items. Yeah. Sorry? I think so. Yeah. I extended it because I received some requests, and since there is no particular hurry, you know, I didn't see why not to extend it. I didn't see what was achieved by having an earlier deadline, essentially. So this is it. I should post, and I haven't posted already, but I should post a sign-up sheet for the final presentations. So it looks a little bit like this. We can have them on the last class, which is a Thursday. I'm still reserving a room, so I mean we have the final exam hour slot on Monday. Okay. Theoretically, that should be it. I don't know if there is extra people when they would like to be accommodated. Okay, so I will ask in a sign-up sheet if there are too many. I don't know whether to propose sometime on Tuesday in case there are two people for Thursday and Monday, or what else to do. Okay, it depends a little bit on the rooms I get. So I will post a sign-up sheet in which I ask you when you would like to present. What I usually try to do is I have a presentation. Say, you know, the final exam is 3 hours, so I'll try to reserve some sessions of 3 hours of length, or 2 or 3 hours of length. And the people that are in a particular session to present, I would appreciate if they stay there, you know, from beginning to end, so that they cheer for their friends, essentially, that do also present in those slots. You know, it's a bit more of a fun experience to be all there. If you, but you don't have to, of course, come to the sessions in which you are not presenting, right? Otherwise, you would be spending all your time there during those days. Okay, so I will be posting these hopefully tonight, otherwise tomorrow morning. So these were the two announcements. Okay, so I received various suggestions on what to do for the future years. One of the ones I like is something that I had considered doing, and then I sort of decided not to do it. And maybe I was wrong. That is, I always wonder whether I should have two tracks for my class, the project track and the homework track. And to try to keep the project track much smaller, 10 projects or something like that, maybe 12 or so, and really follow those projects and make it, harder. So essentially make sure that the projects, should be nice projects, pushing the people a bit more. And instead having the homework track, based on like normal homework. So basically same as what you have had in this class. So suppose I did it in this way. What would be your choice? I mean, how many of you would have done the project even though the project was not compulsory? Can you raise your hand if you would have done the project no matter what? Sorry?
We do a more basic version.
So no, raise really the hand. I want to see. Okay, so maybe it would have been a good idea because the response, like a third of you raised your hands, and I think a third of you is maybe a good percentage, in fact, for what should happen. So
a third of the people
who are in the lecture hall. Yes, I don't know the ones that.
It's already the more modern people.
Right. So this may work incredibly well because. I may try it also for the web class. So doing homework for the people that just want to take the regular class and really instead following much more the people who want to do the projects. So I'll try it for the web class first because I teach that first. And then depending on how that goes, I will do it for the Android class next year. So thank you for the feedback. Okay. Now, there used to be a call chat. Yes. Okay. I get tired of standing for all this time in the same. So what I want to do today is show you a little bit more about Apache Cordova. And talk a little bit about it. So okay, so let's look at how. So first of all, in Apache Cordova, the idea is this: you can look at these, or you can. I'm not commenting on this code in this very moment, but the idea is this: you produce an HTML file, usually only one, but because it doesn't make a lot of sense to have more than one, typically, even though I'm not sure that it hasn't been tried. But you have an HTML file and related JavaScript that work together to present the user with a web page that is the UI of the app. And you implement the application via JavaScript for the dynamic portion, and the JavaScript is able to access via libraries the functionalities of the phone or platform. And if you go to the Apache Cordova website, you can see that it has a large number of backends possible. Many phones, various operating systems, etc., etc. And there is a compatibility matrix that tells you which libraries, they call them plugins, which plugins work on which platforms. For example, the geolocation, the acceleration platform may work on Android and Windows and iOS phones. It may work on Mac laptops because I believe that a Mac laptop has an accelerometer chip inside. I believe so, at least. I've seen demos that use it. But Windows laptops may vary in their ability to use that particular plugin, etc., etc. Okay. So for every plugin, you have a compatibility matrix, and what this enables you to do is write one single application that works for all these platforms. So this is very highly appealing. Okay. The way you do it, I posted on the class website the pointers to the instructions. And so what you do is that this generates in the end. Sorry, let me take my terminal here. So here I'm in a directory which is document UCSC, which is where I keep these Android-related classes. Cordova new, which is my new demo for Cordova that I did in these days. Okay, and if I do an ls, you see that here there is a config.xml that says basically which plugins you have installed. And there is a platforms directory which contains for which platforms you actually want to develop, okay? And the www directory that contains your index.html and the JavaScript and the CSS. So the www directory contains essentially the code that is shared by all the platforms, okay? And then if I do ls platforms, okay, in this case I have only the Android platform installed, but you would have one subdirectory for each one of the particular platforms for which you want to output the code, okay? And the way you install Cordova, I mean, the details are in the web page I pointed you to. You know, I just followed that and it all worked. But essentially, when there are 3 steps involved at a high level. You first create your project. Then you can create the target platforms one by one. I forgot the comment, but it's something like a Cordova add Android or something like that. And then you decide which plugins you want to use, okay? And you import the plugins one by one, because this sort of reduces the code base. There is also a way for you to write your own plugins. For example, if you decided that you need a very strange functionality and you're sure that both iPhone and Android support it, but this does not come in a handy way with an existing plugin, then there is a way for you to write the native code in Java and Objective-C, for the 2 operating systems that implements the plugin library, okay? And then you can still use Apache Cordova with a plugin that you invent. That's the way, in fact, people have written the plugins. The plugin architecture is new in Apache Cordova. Once upon a time, it used to have, a sort of monolithic set of libraries, which made it not very extensive, not as easy to extend as it is now, okay? So if you use plugins, I assume, but I have not tried to do it myself, but I assume that you could also write your very complicated, very special functionality for your very special app in a plugin. And as long as you write the plugin for the 2 operating systems, you would still be able to, to factor out all the commonality in the rest of the UI and code into a single page. So this is, the very general architecture of how this works, okay? And here I got an example working. As I told you, I was able last time in the last class to run without any problems the old version of Cordova, but I wasn't able to run the new version, okay? I haven't completely figured out why, but essentially what's going on is the following. Inside the Android directory, so if you look here inside the tree of files, okay, there is a resources, www, and here there is a copy to index.js, and here in www there is index.html, okay? So here are the files. But you see, this www folder is in fact a link. Well, it's not really a link at the level of operating system files. But Apache, in the configuration files file for this project, has defined the www directory as residing somewhere else outside of the project tree. Okay? And for some reason I don't fully understand, and I decided not to care. My version of Apache, this is probably a very, very low level, very silly problem somewhere, but my version of Apache is unable to note that what is outside of the project tree actually changed. So when I ask it to rebuild the package to install it, it happily disregards any edit I do to my index.html and JavaScript files. Okay? I'm not sure this is a very universal problem, so I didn't want to spend much time bothering with it. And so instead, I can run applications in a different way. That is, if I attach a phone, I'm now going to try to run it using the emulator, but I'm not sure it will work, okay? Because actually the emulator probably doesn't work at all, so let me not waste time. The reason it doesn't work is that it does not have accelerometers, etc. So let me get out. Okay, I had more cables than I thought I had. Okay, great. Another thing I noticed, by the way, playing around with various things, is that there is a huge advantage if you can actually get your, this is if you want to develop seriously in the future. There seems to be a lack of homogeneity in which various vendors have implemented logging. I'm getting very different level of detail in the logs I get out of different fonts. And the fonts from which I get the best logging are these sort of semi-pure Google fonts. So this is a fairly old one. It's a Galaxy Nexus, I think so. It's one of these brick-colored fonts that, I mean, it must be 4 years old. But it works really quite well from the point of view of logging. So I'm sorry, the people not here actually will be able to follow the code, and they should believe that everything works, but they will not actually be able to see what happens. But so to run the code, instead of using Android, instead of using Eclipse, I will be using Eclipse to watch the logs and edit, because it's just very handy, okay? But to run it, I use this command, Cordova run Android. And when I give this command, this will now run the current code. So I give it, this will use the Cordova system to actually build the executable. And Cordova is able to follow all the proper links and all the proper dependencies and build the right piece of code, okay? So now it tells me that it's successful, it's installing it on the device, it's running on the device. Now it's running on the device, and so I can have here in Eclipse the log. Not only I can have it in Eclipse, I could get the log directly on the device if I wanted. So in fact, maybe I should show you how to do that if you like, okay? To have it on the device, I can do adb shell, and then I can say, I think this works, okay? And I get the log in this way. So if I show you what this is seeing at the moment, I wish they had optimized the switching between appliances here. It takes always a bit of time. Hey, wake up. Is this working? Yeah. Okay, so, sorry, I didn't particularly tweak it to make it look great, but I made an example app that shows for acceleration start, and acceleration stop, okay? The behavior of these is very simple. It's just a demo of how to read values from the accelerometer, no? When I say acceleration start, this will start reading values at a pace of, I don't know, I think 1, 2 a second or something like that, okay? And when I say acceleration stop, the listener stop listening. So it's a very simple demo of an acceleration. But you also see that I can get these buttons that are half decent looking. Well, you know, I should really frame the page better. So I want to talk a little bit about how to get this up and running. Now, if I switch again to laptop, the funny thing is that here I have some lights that show me the device that is on, but they don't correspond at all to what is on, so that's why I get confused. So how does that code work? It works like this. So in the new version, I preferred to keep separate index.html, which contains the HTML code, from index.js, which contains the JavaScript, okay? Now, I know that you're not expert in officially in JavaScript and HTML, but I'm going to guide you through the code purely for your curiosity. There is no assignment on these anyway, so it's simply for your information, to show you how things are done in other contexts, okay? So the HTML code is quite simple. Contains a big it contains a big comment, okay, which we don't care so much. Then it contains a head section in which we load the resources, okay? There is some style sheets that style it, and I think the only important choice is this. For this particular application, I decided to use jQuery Mobile as a style sheet. jQuery Mobile is a library. You can go look at its documentation, sorry, on the web. Okay, jQuery Mobile. Okay, so attach our optimized web framework. This essentially gives you styling that I don't know if there are examples that we can look at. Upgrade guides, supported platforms, source code. Oh boy, where is the? I just wanted to have a demos. Okay. We can do. It gives you things like buttons. Okay, so basic markup. Okay, you can decide that the corners need to look in a certain way. It contains ways to do the forms that look nice, etc., etc. So you can essentially it contains date picker elements, so widgets for the date pickers that look good on mobile. So it essentially, the jQuery mobile contains a large amount of things that help your UI look good and usable on mobile. Okay, so in my index.html, I'm loading the CSS for it, and I'm also loading later the JavaScript that goes with it. So essentially, I'm using a set of libraries for this. Okay, I'm reading the Cordova JavaScript library. I'm reading my index.javascript, which is where I put my code, and I'm reading both jQuery and jQuery mobile. Okay, there are other libraries you can use for mobile. I used the jQuery for this example just because it's commonly used, and so I wanted to just tell you how it can be included. This example, I will upload it so that you can look at what I wrote in case for your reference, maybe later on, if you need ever to use Cordova, you can look back at it, even though it's not very sophisticated, okay? So I load all these libraries that will help my page look slightly more usable on mobile, and then I say body, I put a title, I put some subtitles, acceleration and other, and then I'm simply putting some buttons so that due to the jQuery mobile, they will be styled to be as wide as the screen. In truth, I should have taken a little bit more time to make it look pretty, but you know that I never make anything look pretty, right? That's my approach. But I should have taken slightly more time to make things look pretty, to define margins for the button, etc., etc. So this, by the way, I might as well tell you now. There is a you have to make things look pretty in either the native Android UI tools, like the Android SDK that you have been using for the class, or in HTML. I think that different people may have different opinions on these depending on their background. The web developers will find it easy to make things look great in HTML and CSS, and other people may find it easier to make things look great in the Android native XML declaration. My personal preference is that I've always been much better at making things look decent in Android than in HTML. I think this is in part due to the to two reasons. Okay, one is that Android was born later, so a lot of the things there was a lot of experience gathered from how you actually style web pages that was incorporated in the Android XML description of how to lay out a screen. Okay. So, for example, these relative layouts that you have available, and many of these things enable you to really lay out things much more carefully for the given screen size. I find it that I have much more pleasant fine control on elements in the Android style layout. At least this is true for me. Okay. The other difference is that really the HTML natively per se is born in the realm of web pages, where there are some basic assumptions, right? So a web page is generally always a scrollable object, and it is understood that the screen is a viewport on a larger object, right? But the user can always scroll around and view the larger object by scrolling around it. And this is a somewhat very different point of view from mobile that says, this is your fixed screen and you have to make most things fit. It is true that in Android you have a scroll view that you can overlay on an underlying view so that you can get an underlying view to scroll. And you do use it, you know? For example, list views scroll automatically, but you can also make, you know, long text scroll. But as you know, you have to use that very sparingly, right? You never see a game in which you have to scroll around to see the whole chessboard, right? It would be horrible. And so for the kind of fixed placement that you typically do on a mobile, I much prefer myself the Android layout tools. Okay, I realize that this is personally probably biased because actually I probably put a lot more time into making my Android stuff look great than my web stuff look great. But it's also true that, you know, Android is much, you know, in my opinion, it's better designed. It's much linear designed. The web has a much longer history, and you really can see all this history in the sort of intricate and partly historical way in which HTML and CSS together lay out a page. Okay, there is a lot of things that are just, you know, they need to be there because of you know, they used to be done that way 10 years ago, and so they still need to be there, but they don't make a lot of sense now in the web world. Okay, so this said, this body contains the following. It contains these buttons, and it contains a couple of output divs. So a div is like a rectangle in which you can put stuff, very simply. Okay, so that's all there is to it, actually. And then there is a call for app.initialize that will initialize the application. We will see later. So the HTML, I was using it just to lay out, you know, buttons in the most trivial possible way. Now, what does the JavaScript do? So there is some part of it. This is the initializer. So the way they've done it is different from maybe the style they were using once upon a time, and they decided to follow. So JavaScript is a pleasant language. I mean, it has its own set of larger set of quirks, but it's a pleasant language that comes with objects and variables. And so what we're doing here is we're defining a variable app that has that is an object. Okay, you can define objects on the fly in this way. No, in fact, you can only define objects. You cannot really define classes in JavaScript. Let me not get into the structure of JavaScript, but in JavaScript you deal with objects directly. Okay, so we say that a variable app is an object that goes from here to when you close the corresponding brace at the very end. Okay, so this is a statement in which we are declaring a variable app. Inside the variable, okay, since this is an object looks like, a little bit like a Python dictionary for those of you who know what it is, or you know, a JSON dictionary. But essentially, it looks like a tag value, or if you prefer to call it that way, field value. Okay, so this app object has a field initialize, a field accel ID, a field bind events, etc. Now, you may be wondering, why do we need to build an object and put the values in it? Why can't we define variables natively? Okay. In fact, the answer is we could define variables natively. This accel ID null is essentially a variable. I could have written here var accel ID is equal to null. I could have done it. Okay. What do I gain by doing this? By doing this, I gain a sort of weak notion of namespace, right? Because now I can access this accel ID only if I write app.accel_id. So it doesn't clash with anything else that could possibly be called in the same way. Okay? So this is the style in which the new Cordova examples were written, and I was following it. So the initialize function, you know, initialize is a field that has as value a function. Unlike in Java, JavaScript has this beautiful notion that variables can have functions as values. These are, you know, incredibly like it. Remember the annoyance in Java in Android, no? When we had to package everything into an object, because otherwise we couldn't actually pass it around. So that you have these all these classes that are subclasses of runnable, just because we needed a method run, because we needed essentially to package a function. You know, all the time we had this annoyance, and now finally it's gone. Okay, so that's a good thing. This function calls this.bind events. This is like to say app, actually. So unbind events is a function that adds an event listener to device ready, and yada yada. You can read what it does, but essentially what it does is this, that you are guaranteed that on device ready will be called, so this code finally will start when the device is ready. What is this business of device ready? Well, let me put it by analogy. In Android, you have these functions that are called onCreate, onResume. They essentially tell you when you know that when onResume is called, you know that the app is running and it's in front of the user, right? The fact is that for web pages, as I'm sure you know when you browse the web, they are loaded in incremental fashion. So sometimes your JavaScript can start executing before the whole page is loaded, right? And sometimes this is not what you want, because maybe your JavaScript is saying, hey, write this thing there. But the there place has not been loaded yet. Okay? So you don't know yet where to write it. And so the JavaScript ends up not doing anything. And you think, no, damn, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to run this piece of JavaScript, but I wanted to run it once the page is there, actually, the whole of it, right? So that I'm sure that I'm talking about things that actually exist. Okay? And so this is the reason why you have this on-device ready function. Okay? Most JavaScript frameworks give you the equivalent of that, but in Cordova it's important to use the Cordova on device ready. So to follow this essentially this thing that they give you already written, because if you don't do that, you may have encounter problems. The problem is not only that the page may not be parsed already, but the other problem is that the underlying libraries that Cordova is using need to be loaded already and available. Okay, so there is a bit of preparation that Cordova needs to do before your JavaScript actually can have confidence of running with everything defined. Okay, so okay, what do we do? Well, I log that the device is ready, and then what I'm doing in this way is this: I'm attaching two listeners to the two buttons that start and stop the acceleration. So in Android, we would do find element by ID, and then once we have the view, we would have we could we either attach the behavior in the XML, or else we would have that we can attach an on-click listener inside the Java code. Okay, so this piece here is equivalent to find the view by ID. Okay, dollar is actually a function name. It's the name of the jQuery underlying object that helps you do everything in jQuery. So dollar open parenthesis something, you are passing the argument to jQuery, and jQuery is kind enough, if you give it a string that is of this type, to treat this string as an identifier for an HTML element. Okay, there are some conventions. IDs start with a hash sign. Classes start with a dot, and you can concatenate this in a reasonable way. For example, you can say P with ID I don't know, cat. Okay, this is not very useful with an ID because the IDs are unique, so you might as well just say cat, ID cat. Okay, but if you, for example, have a div of class output, okay, where output is your class, this in jQuery will select all divs that are of class output. And so there is a language that is similar to the language of CSS that enables you in a simple way to pick one or more elements of your page, and so that you can act on them. And in jQuery, you can act on them in simple ways, well, also in complicated ways, but we will be looking at simple ways. The simple ways we will be looking at is attaching listeners to these elements, or else modifying their HTML content so that we can, inject our HTML in particular places in the page. Okay, so in this case, we are saying that when accelerations, if we are attaching to the element with the ID acceleration start, and if we look on the other page, this page, acceleration start is here, so we have a button that has as an ID acceleration start. Okay, so we will be attaching something to this button, And what we attach is that when somebody clicks, this function is executed. That does the following. First we log that we clicked on acceleration. I find that adding these log messages, I mean, it's a little bit silly. You can remove them later, but initially it's very handy because one of the most maddening mistakes I make is that I write, very sophisticated JavaScript code, and then I attach it to a button, and then I click and nothing happens. And then I don't know whether it's because I did a somewhat incredibly complicated mistake, and sometimes, I go for 5 minutes trying to figure out why I have a mistake. And then maybe the error is simply because I'm selecting nothing. Maybe I made a typo in what I'm selecting. I'm forgetting that I actually called it start Excel instead of Excel start. And so, to avoid going in loops for hours, now I got into the habit of logging when I get an event, because at least I can. It helps me know where the problem is. So when you click on this, I'm calling this function app watch Excel. Again, I'm calling the watch Excel field of app, and this watch Excel field is just defined below. You see, this is fields can have functions as values. Okay. So if you will, notice the difference between the languages, by the way. In Java, there is a very big difference. When you define a class, you can have variables and methods, but the two are like very different. In JavaScript, there is really no difference. All of them are fields, no? And some fields have values. I mean, every field has a value, and some values happen to be functions, and some values happen to be just values, okay? But it's much more homogeneous, the treatment. So, I mean, from an aesthetical point of view, I love JavaScript. But I mean, it comes with its own set of quirks, but it's very powerful. And when I click on stop acceleration, I execute a stop acceleration, okay? So how does this work? Well, when I say watch acceleration, this is the function. You see, this is a field that has, as value, it has a function, so it's very simple in the declaration. I log that I'm inside here just because, why not? I define a variable. This is, a local variable that is itself an object. The variable options is an object that happens to have only one field with value 500, okay? And then I'm saying app.xlid. You remember the XLID field, I defined it above, and I defined it as null. Now I'm going to overwrite it, and I'm going to say that this is equal to navigator accelerometer watch acceleration. So this is the plugin. I installed the plugin for the accelerometer, right? And I'm passing to this plugin method call. I'm passing it 3 arguments. Maybe it would be easier if I split it. Okay, I pass to it 3 arguments. One is a function to be executed in case of success, a function to be executed in case of failure, and an object which contains a list of options, of which I'm setting only one. Okay, so you see, very linear how it works, very concise. If I get the success function is again a field, I say app accel success. So this is a function that gets an argument x, which is also an object which has fields, no? And the fields are x, y, z, and timestamp and some others. In the documentation for the plugin, they are very well described. So what I'm doing is this: I'm saying variable m is equal to the square root of the sum of the squares of the acceleration on the 3 axes. I'm just computing the magnitude of the acceleration, okay? And then I'm saying dollar output one, hash output one. So I'm taking the HTML element that has as ID output one, and I'm writing into it the value of my variable. Very simple code. And if you look here, the output of the variable, there is a div which has that as output. Maybe this is not so pretty, in fact. We can change it on the fly to make it a sort of div, and then I can make maybe P of ID. I'm not sure if there is better styling for paragraphs. I think we are going to find out, okay? But this will be another correct way to write this piece of code if we wanted, okay? So that's all we do. If there is an error, I just say accelerometer error, because I don't really know very well what to do. If I want to stop acceleration, I do this. If app_accel ID, you know, this is the place where I store the, when you started this watch acceleration, you are returned an identifier that is like a handle, no? So that you can use this handle if you later want to modify the way in which you are listening to the acceleration. In particular, you can call a clear watch passing it this handle, and it will know which callback to terminate, essentially. Okay, and this creates, and then you say app_accel ID is equal to null to know that you have already unregistered. Okay, so that if you try to unregister twice, there is nothing happens. Okay, this is not great code, by the way. I essentially copied and adapted an example. I'm not entirely sure what happens if you press twice. I mean, the code doesn't crash, but I'm not sure what horrible thing may be happening in the background. If I, oh yes, in fact, the code is completely horrible, and I copied it from an example. But now I can show you the error in real time. Let me show it to you. So, what do you think happens if I press many times on the acceleration start button? Well, there are two behaviors. Either somehow it's smart enough to know that you have already registered a listener and it doesn't register it twice. But this would be unlikely, because what's the notion of a listener? How does it know that these two calls are coming from the same thing? What's a thing, right? So the good, lucky solution is unlikely. What's the stupid thing that is almost certain to happen? Anybody suggest?
Another listener?
Yeah, no, not another listener, because we do call it always with the same listener. So, but what happens?
Now we have, now it's got two.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it will be called more and more frequently.
Have two events.
Exactly, exactly. So let's work it in real time. I figured that only now. I mean, this example is actually copied from their examples, but we will fix it, okay? But let's first have fun. So this is running from before, okay? Actually, maybe I should restart it for you, okay? Let me restart it. It's more fun. Hold on a moment. How do I erase on this? Okay. So it's called code of a new. Okay, I launch it. Okay, now there is nothing happening. So I press once. Very good, right? I press many times. And now that poor thing is receiving all the callbacks. You see, it goes incredibly fast. And if I tell it to stop, it doesn't work, right? Because it only remembers about the last one. So, I mean, it's not so hard to fix this code, actually, no? But we might as well do it. So, what we need to do is this. So, we need to say, first, stop the old callbacks. I mean, actually, why do we need to stop the old callbacks, right? We don't need, because there is no reason to unregister and then register. Okay, so I think we only need to say if app.accel ID is oh boy, how do you say not in JavaScript this way? Anybody who remembers? Any JavaScript wizard that remembers how to say not? I think it's this way. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, speak up. Yeah. No, you do speak up. Sorry? Yeah. So, sorry, that's what I wrote. I think an exclamation mark is not. I tell you, I get incredibly confused between languages. I mean, I know how they work in theory, but I forget all about the punctuation. So this should probably fix it. And so now if I run it, Okay, fine. This is always the debug feed. We don't care so much about the debug feed, but we can run it again by this. This will recompile and run it. And so if we look at what happens, now I can go to the document camera for those of you who are here. This will start it. Okay. Now let's see how it works. So if I say start, it starts. If I say start many other times, it doesn't do anything, right? And if I say stop, it stops. So okay, we fixed the bug. Okay, fine, great. Okay, so this is a very simple example. I think that the language itself in JavaScript is very interesting. It has these features of functions as first-class values. It also has this idea that whatever you ever do, it's actually much better if it doesn't take any time. So if you do anything that requires time, like a network call, etc., what you do is you say, do this thing, and then call this function when you are done. So you are explicitly saying what to do after the thing is done. And so since this is the end of class and we can have a bit of fun, I can tell you that these language features have an interesting effect on the execution efficiency of code. So one of the things is this. So the old, not old, but the prevalent way of writing code is that you write this code, and then at some point you write do this query and get me the cursor. And like you write things like a cursor is equal to get query, run query of whatever on a database. Or for example, in your Java code, you had this thing in which you prepare an HTTP request object, right? And then you say to run the object and to get the result out of it. But so essentially, you write a linear code. But in the middle of this linear code, there are some pieces that take time, okay? And what happens is that when you get stuck in one of these pieces that takes time, the operating system somehow knows if the time requires access to an external device, such as disk or network, the operating system knows that it's going to take time. Essentially, it puts you to wait on some kind of semaphore internally, right? And while you are sleeping on that semaphore, waiting for the result to come back from the disk or the network or somewhere else, the operating system is letting some other thread execute, right? I think you know this from operating systems if you have taken operating systems, or you may know this anyway from, I don't know, osmosis otherwise, no? But this is how things work. So one of the implications is this, that imagine that a lot of what you have to do takes a lot of time. Now, for example, in a web page, imagine the people who wrote Gmail. I don't know how Gmail is written, so I'm making here just as an example, okay? But a lot of the things you may want to do in Gmail take time, no? Because you press there, but then it has to tell the server that you want to do that, and there is a reply that eventually will come. So a lot of these things are not immediate. Another thing that you can imagine is, imagine a web server that has to reply to your web request. How does a web server work? Well, it gets your request and it says, oh, okay, I need this piece of data. And then it sends, some request for the data to the backend, to the databases or to wherever the data happens to be stored. And then it has to wait, no? The wait, when you access, I don't know, Wikipedia, but also Travelocity or so to do your reservation, anything, right? Your request generates need for data, so the web server responds to this request for data and then starts waiting. And in order to keep the system efficient, what they do is that they, of course, use the same CPU to answer to many web requests, right? And so the CPU is compute. What happens figuratively? Maybe I should do it in this way. I don't. Let me stop. Switch the Hangout a moment around. What happens is similar to this. Okay. Okay. There is only part of the part that will be enough. that you start and you run for a while, and then you stop because you're waiting for data, okay? So in the meantime, some other request that is waiting will start running, and then it will stop waiting for the data. And in the meantime, some other request that arrives, waits, runs for a bit. And then they all go to sleep. After some time, your data that you have requested finally comes in. So you run for another bit of time here, and maybe if you are lucky enough that you don't need any other request, you generate the answer to the person. And then, this data might have arrived here, so this is waiting, and then this gets to run here a little bit, and then goes to sleep again, etc. So what I want to convey is that a typical working of a web server is a complete switch between threads, between threads of execution. Okay. Now, the point is there are two consequences with this. So this is just general culture, but I think it's very interesting for the class and for the. But so there are two consequences of this. The sort of obvious consequence is that you need to do what is called in operating systems a context switch. So you need to change a lot of the information that you have associated with the current execution. So the content of the CPU registers, the stack, and etc. etc. So this is cost number one. And cost number one is there, and it's fine, and it's understood. Fine. The cost that is relatively new, I mean, is old, but is new, how important it is another one, okay? That while you run this thing, you are accessing, because you are in a particular thread, so you are accessing a particular region of the memory with a particular set of variables. And so your cache becomes full of the data that is useful for this thread. And, in modern processors, the speed between accessing the cache and accessing the memory has been diverging. Okay? The price for a cache hit has been increasing more and more and more. Okay? So what happens when you switch to another thread is not only that you have to purge your registers, etc., but the real penalty is that as soon as you switch, since you are switching the set of variables and other stuff that you're accessing all the time, you are going to have a much larger percentage of cache misses. And these cache misses can be 100 times slower than a cache hit. Okay, so the penalty becomes huge once you switch. Okay, this is a real penalty in terms of execution speed. There are various algorithms in the literature for which there is a theoretical and a practical result that do not coincide. No? The theoretical result is that one algorithm is much better than another one. The practical result is that the opposite is true, because the execution model by which you compute the cost of the algorithm considers all basic operations to be constant time. But the algorithms are so different in use of the cache that there is a huge advantage of one algorithm compared to the other. Okay? So we're looking at this phenomenon. I mean, people are looking at this phenomenon. So what happens in a normal architecture of a web server written in a normal language such as Java, for instance, is that you do quite a bit of process switching, and you waste quite a bit of time having inefficient cache use. Okay? And this, in the end, is one of the limiting factors to how many things you can do in parallel, how many requests you can answer at the same time. Okay? One of the nice things about the JavaScript model is that in JavaScript, you never quite do the things in parallel in the same way. You do something, then you stop, and you say, when you're done, call F. Okay? And then something else gets done, but it gets done in the same thread. There is essentially only one thread that is in charge of doing all these various things. In a browser, you can run all the JavaScript out of one thread only, okay? So when the data comes back, this F will be called, and if not, it's queued in the set of functions that need to be called in the JavaScript. But you have one thread only, and this makes it more efficient. And the fact that JavaScript has become used also as a web server language in Node.js is essentially determined by the fact that it's much cheaper to switch between activities in this model that is purely event-driven than in this model. Okay? The cost is much, because, okay, fine, of course, the few variables that you're accessing, you still have cache misses. But all the other variables, so the stack frames and all that will still be in the cache. Okay? So that's one of the main advantages of Node.js. Now, another thing that is interesting to me, at least, is this. JavaScript, to me, looks sometimes a little bit pedestrian in the fact that you really have to say, do this and then do F. There has been a lot of work in language theory that unfortunately is only partly traduced in practice for actual languages in this way, right? Imagine you have a long piece of code. So this is your piece of code. And I tell you, cut it here. That. You cut it, okay? You can call this F. No? So this thing here can become your function F, this piece here. Okay? And you can see which pieces, which variables x. So for example, I can say y is equal to x plus 1, and here I can say x is equal to 3. No? So since x is right here and assigned here, this needs to be a parameter of x, of your function. Because it's something that is, you know, in which after you're using the result from before, right? So taking this piece of code and packaging it in a function is something known as continuations. So this function f is known in language theory as the continuation of the code from this execution point. Okay? And you can always reason about continuations. And if you have pure languages without side effects, there is a perfectly theoretical way. So if you have a language that is defined in a mathematical way, which you can easily define what is the effect of doing stuff, there is a perfectly good way of deriving automatically what should be the shape, what should be the continuation at any given point. I could tell you, for example, I could define a program transformation that I can say person is equal to exec of a query queue, no? And then I can write my code as if it was sequential, and inside this will be translated to something like exec the query queue calling f, you know, and then f of some arguments is equal to this particular function, okay? That would be a perfectly good way of letting you write code in a more natural way without having to worry about which arguments you need to pass to the continuation, and then having the continuation computed automatically. The reason why this fails in practice, is that many functions have complicated effects, and so it is sometimes complicated to find out what you produced here that you will actually need there. Okay, so that's the difficulty, and that's why it's done by hand in JavaScript. And I think it's somewhat of a pity, and I think that you know, it would be great if we could have languages in which this is, you could get the benefit essentially of the execution model of JavaScript, but with a way of writing the code that is more similar to what we do in say Java or these kind of linear languages. Okay, so the trouble of writing these large bodies of JavaScript is that it becomes a little bit like spaghetti code, because what is contiguous in your mind, in the sense of the temporal sequencing of the events, becomes non-contiguous in the code that actually implements it. Okay, so but there is this very nice advantage for the execution model. So this is a general consideration for the language that is interesting. And otherwise, what I wanted to show to you is very simply that if you, this is a documentation of the accelerometer that I was using. You know, I basically adapted one of these, this code. You see, it has the same type of error, right? No, actually, this is not the code that watches it. I think the code that watches it is here. You see, start watch has the same type of bug that I was showing to you. But there is a very large set of APIs that you can use. Okay, and if we want to try together to use another one, it's quite easy. For example, I don't know, context, device, events, file, geolocation, globalization, compass, I don't know. We can look at one of them, for example. Connection gives you the state of the connection of the phone. Okay, well, that's not so incredibly interesting, perhaps. but this gives you. And if we wanted to use it, maybe let's use a slightly more exciting one, I guess. Um, there is a storage one, compass, camera. I don't know. But at any rate, this is how you add one of these. So if you are in your project and you decide that you want to use a compass, what you do is that you add the plugin. This will fetch it and install it for you, and it's done. And so at this point, you can actually access its methods in the code. And I don't know, would you like me to try to build something with one of these APIs? We could do that, or else I can help you on projects, as I promised I would do every class from now to the end. So are there people who have questions about projects that they think is interesting? So I don't know, I could talk more about Cordova. It's at your option. I was like as a general comment, this works well. What are the drawbacks and the advantages? So the advantage is obviously that it works for every platform. The advantage is also that doing many things in JavaScript is a bit more succinct than doing them in Java. The drawback is that it looks very simple at the beginning, but then getting a great pagination takes art. So maybe you use these responsive JavaScript frameworks that paginate your page for the width and size of your actual form. Then you need to start worrying about the fact that this is a single page app, right? So what do you do if you want to have multiple pages? Well, there are tricks to do that. For example, one trick is to have a single big page and then show only a portion of it. But then you have to do that, and you have to remember in some place in which page you are supposed to be, right, as a variable yourself, and then etc. etc. So it starts simple, but it also gets complicated once you start to build larger apps. And in the end, it's a good question, but a debatable question of what is better to do in one way or the other. Okay. In Android, you get things that are much harder to get in Cordova. For example, I don't think you can get anything similar to a service running in the background. So if you want to have a portion of your app that runs in the background and then does stuff, it's easier to do that in native Android. I'm thinking actually that for the web class I will teach, since most of this is web development, I will give people the choice of whether to have the UI, built traditionally via a normal web browser or built via Cordova on a mobile device and then talking via Ajax, so via JavaScript. In JavaScript, you can also send and receive messages, right? And you can decode them with JSON. So you can talk from this web app to a backend in a similar way as you can from Android. And so I'm thinking that maybe from a web development class, since all the work would be really web related, to let people choose to do the UI on a mobile device in this way, rather than in a classical browser. So this is essentially what I wanted to tell you. I mean, we can have fun with some more API if you like, or I can answer questions on projects.
We'll be using the location census.
Okay.
One thing we were wondering about was what kind of frequency brings down. They have some examples, but I don't believe that. We panels to do some experimentation that could take a while.
Yeah.
Do you know any?
No, I don't know. I mean, if you listen to the GPS, it drains the battery fast, but a lot of people in the car, they have a charger and they plug it in when they use navigation for a long time, I assume. At least, I do, because I use it all the time. Still, I think my phone would survive a few hours on GPS. What do you want to do? I mean, the advice I can give you is that there is a nice, I mean, I have not used it because it's more recent of when I try to play with these things, but there is a nice geofencing API that takes care of doing a half reasonable job of checking whether we are coming closer to points of interest.
No.
Okay, so because then it's sort of What's your application actually? Can you?
We're doing where's my car? Um, the basic functionality that we already have on the user saves the location, get back to it. But the real kind of interesting one is the automatically detecting when the user parks their car. And so we have two different methods. The first one is using the location, and we basically we have two states for driving and not driving. We transition to them based on average distance traveled recently. So in the not driving state, we check the location every 15 minutes. That doesn't matter at all. And so if they average 20 miles per hour in that time, then you're assuming they're driving.
And how do you decide when they stop driving?
So that one is when they're driving, we check the location much more quickly. And if they're moving slower than 10 miles per hour for 5 minutes, we assume that they're parked and put that as a tentative location, and then they can go into the app and make it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting and really difficult app to do. Let me just try to think at it, okay? Because, for example, here in Santa Cruz, my problem is this, that I come and I have to park, often I park in the parking structure there, right? And so what happens is this, that I go there and then I start moving slowly. Then I park and then I start moving slowly again because I'm now exiting by foot, okay? And so how do you know, you don't want to say that I park when I enter because I start to go slowly. So how can you tell when I stop being in the car and I start being on foot? There is a pause, but sometimes I have to pause also because somebody in front of me is pulling out of one of the slots, and so I have to sit there and wait, until they finish pulling out.
We don't really go with the GPS. We don't have a great way to do that, which is why we're planning on having like a list of possible parking spots that the user can check the timestamp on them and pick one. But that's why we also have a second option, which is looking at Bluetooth.
Looking at Bluetooth would be fantastic, great for many people who
have Bluetooth.
Yes. Another feature that would be good enough often would be you are going fast, and from some point on you are going slowly. If you could sometimes only display, where you were going slowly, that would be good enough. Because sometimes my doubt is, did I park it there or there? Where it's in two fairly different directions.
Possible.
I see.
And if the user wants to, they can go back and let's see this.
Right. So certainly having Bluetooth and having the Bluetooth terminated is a very strong signal that you park. Yeah.
So the reason we don't want to do that is because none of us have Bluetooth cars.
Right.
So we can test it using our laptops and stuff. We want them more general.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so we were basically, since we don't really care very much when they start driving, we just need to catch it. We're pulling infrequently.
Yeah. Right. No, I think you're doing the right thing, but I think when the person is driving, you can pull more frequently, because if they started your app, yeah, I think it's fine. I don't know really how to do it better. Jesus, do you have any ideas?
The problem is that it's all related to acceleration, and there is constant even at high velocity. So,
no, but you don't, if the phone is in my pocket and I walk, you have a periodic jiggling.
That could happen in the car too. I mean, if they haven't seen a couple,
but maybe not for like a minute, right? Because it depends on the suspensions and the street, I guess. But often, once you start driving, you are sort of. It's right. It may be more smooth. Yeah.
This is just supposed to be able to get it where you park, right?
Yeah.
So once you said you follow.
Well, yeah, no, there's a user toggle, and we already have that working. So the user can manually put it in, but the idea is, what if the user gets in his car, right? Drives somewhere, parks, then heads to a bar, and he's coming out of the bar, and he's like, oh wait, where did I put my car? I forgot to save the location. Oh no, app save coming on.
Yeah, because it's when you park, you don't don't yet know that you will have forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do go, oh my god, this place is huge, I don't know, I'm not going to remember, and in that case, yeah, I can save it manually. But we've already done that, and that's not hard at all.
Yeah.
What we want to do is have the phone automatically using the sensors.
No, I think it's a very I mean, once I was searching my car for I think an hour and a half, and I had to leave a trail and make a search pattern on the city because I was going to a very important appointment, and so my mind was so full of what was going to happen and what I was going to be saying, etc., that I completely blanked out on where the car was. But in a radius of almost half a mile, and so yeah.
So so we hope to get automatic detection of parking, and so Bluetooth and GPS were our best choice because Bluetooth is so reliable if they have it.
If they have it, yeah.
And GPS is always better.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very nice project. I think the idea of the accelerator, is very good to try to use the accelerometer. I don't know other things that you could use.
We could try the accelerometer, but we're just not.
It would take you a bit of time to provide it because it would have to gather data enough from real users and then start to learn.
Yeah. So I don't think that's feasible for this. Actually.
Yeah. No, of course. Well, very nice.
Yeah, so we're having the automatic detection be our constantly running service so that they don't have to have the app switched on. So they can navigate and it'll work. And
very nice.
Yeah, no, we spent like an hour working out when the transition should happen. Big diagram going forward. That was fun.
Any other questions on projects that we can try to brainstorm? Everything? No other question? What would you like me to do then? Or what should we do?
I guess I kind of hate to be talking everything, but we haven't started on the Bluetooth yet. Can you go over?
No, because I have never done it.
Okay.
But I think did you try this with Bluetooth once? But maybe.
Well, it shouldn't be too hard.
Just a bit. So I assume that there is an API that is quite simple to know whether the Bluetooth is on or off or connected. That the device manager, you can ask for the Bluetooth service and you can ask that.
But we also need to know which device is connected.
Right. But the thing that I was interested in is, and it's not really related to your application, but how difficult it is to control pairing with particular devices, or is this done by the Android framework and you don't need to care at all about that? So the pairing handshake, where you want to pair with a device and you have to type in the PIN, etc., is that taken care of always by Android, or can you also inject your code into that? Do you happen to know?
Because with NNC, I did my own code. They have like a basic structure you could call it.
I see. So there will be these callbacks in which you have to, they ask you for the code, and so you have to build the DUI to ask for the pairing code, and then you have to.
Yeah, you complete.
Yes.
Just and then go to add.
I see. And the probably is just a way also to let the phone connect to whatever it wants to connect, and then you can, via your app, get the device manager and ask which Bluetooth device is connected with. Yeah, anything else? Would you like? Yeah?
It sounded like maybe you don't have any experience with this. I would be interested in seeing the process behind developing custom plugin, like just even a basic one that would like lock something up for Java. Is that scenario that
I see. So I don't have specific experience of building those plugins. However, you know, I've built libraries that talk to the JavaScript in the browser, but not Cordova plugins. So building libraries is simple. I think we covered it in part in class, right? Or if not, I mean, are you interested in me saying a couple of words on it or not? Yeah. So I mean, the way you build a JavaScript Java library that can, which your JavaScript can talk is this. You build a web view. In the web view, you can declare, you can attach a library. I think we covered this in one of the previous classes. Okay. Sorry, the JavaScript interface, right? And so the only issue that you need to take a little bit of care on is how to pass back and forth information between the two. Okay. What I've done in the past, whenever I needed to do it, is a very lowly approach that actually works fairly well, which is to say that the unit I will pass, so from the JavaScript to Java, I will actually pass a string that contains a JSON encoding of whatever data structure I want to pass. Okay, and then on the Java side, I take the string, I decode it, and I do whatever I want on the string. Okay, and so if you create a library that is called lib and has a method called f, you call it by saying lib.f open parentheses, and you give your argument in JavaScript, and that's how you go from JavaScript to Java. For the return part, you say you produce what you want in Java, and then you say webview.loadURL, and instead of a URL, you give it a string that looks like JavaScript : and then it can contain anything you want. And that string is essentially JavaScript that will be interpreted in the web view. Okay, and so often that contains simply again a JSON string that will be decoded to whatever it needs to be. Okay. So that's the way I have implemented these libraries, and these I have used quite extensively in a lot of applications. So I imagine, but I have not done it, but I imagine that implementing a Cordova plugin entails essentially two things. One is that you have to write your Android code to implement the plugin in Java, no? The main functionality. And then you need to write a layer of wrapping in which you wrap your functionality in such a way that it can be called easily from the JavaScript. So there must be these two steps, but I have not done them. You are right. So, you know, one of the apps I wrote had an extensive web view and an extensive non-web view portion. So maybe I could have written it by wrapping the whole non-web view portion inside a Cordova plugin. Okay, so why didn't I do it? I didn't do it because in my case I had a web view that was showing you something, but the non-web view portion, the portion I needed, so I had a portion that needed to be native because it was doing very particular things on the network. And at that point, there was no possible plugin that already existed in Cordova that would have done the same thing. I was basically scanning the network, trying to find if you had any webcam that you wanted to configure, right? So I need to do the port scan in a certain way, and you cannot do these type of things well inside JavaScript because you don't have the right methods for the network. So at that point, I decided, fine, I need a web view, but also a non-web view portion. So the question could have arisen of, do I design the rest in as a Cordova plugin or not? And I decided not, for a fairly fundamental reason. That is, the version that was not in a web view, I wanted it to really be able to change across multiple pages. So I wanted to easily go from one view to another. So this version, I needed to change it to have direct access and change the UI in a fairly fundamental way. What it was doing essentially is it was scanning the network, giving you a list of webcams that it found on the network. You could click on each one of them, and then you could configure it by entering some parameters. No, and building all these UI. Cordova plugins are not supposed to have a UI, right? Because the UI is in charge of the web view. And so I would have needed an extensive way of doing the callbacks and of building all these alternative pages that would have given me the rest of the functionality. And it was so strange to think at it done in this way that actually never really considered Cordova as an alternative. But in retrospect, I think I was right not to use Cordova for this reason. So I think this gives you perhaps one example of thing that would not have fit well in a plugin. I think the things that fit well in a plugin are the things that give you access to some particular functionality that is hidden in the phone, not a UI flow that is exposed to the user. And since mine was really a mix of the two, because I needed to go back and forth, I don't know, it was much more natural to write. I mean, I could have written the network scan in one way and then, everything, I mean, basically chopping it in smaller pieces. But due to the various pieces, it would have been difficult. Does this help? No, no. Well, but now you know a bit of it. Yeah. What are you considering when writing as a plugin? A curiosity?
We tried some. We tried using Cordova for CC Hackathon, and for we're trying to write a custom plugin for face with push notifications. It's that was done with Java code, and it's recognizable plugin called bring it to life.
No, I don't know. Yeah, this is, I think, one of the unfortunate things of software, right? That more so than in other fields, even if you are so-called experts, you end up running around on these very tiny details. I mean, I assume that, I don't quite know what to think. So this is a philosophical level, but some other professions maybe are more insulated from this running around on small things. On the other hand, I don't know to what extent it's true. For example, architects or engineers also have bugs. It's simply that they deliver the product with a bug and they don't call it a bug. The engineering to building had a water leak forever in a corner, right? Had it been a web app, people would have called it a bug. But in a sense, these type of bugs don't stop the whole building don't prevent the whole building from working. In the same way as these, very tiny details, or like me 2 days ago that I couldn't build this otherwise working web app. Why? Well, because my Eclipse does not understand that I'm editing a file that happens to be declared to it, but fall outside of its app tree, right? I mean, this is a sort of, yeah, it's frustrating how little leverage we gain with a.
I think like one of the bigger problems with was just that there's been so much good. Yeah, there's like 7 different tutorials about how to do things. Like a lot of them are for all these old versions that are super deprecated. So functionality is drastically changed.
Right. So I was probably following the way to import it in Eclipse that used to work because it used to work once upon a time, and now instead they want to build everything using the Cordova tools. But even in the new tutorials I found they don't deprecate using Eclipse to run it, but I haven't found a way to actually make it work. So I'm not quite sure. Do you know whether it works or not? Do you know?
That might have been a problem. We were building the operating system.
I see. I see. But my problem was quite fundamental, It was one of those moments in which I thought I was going crazy because I was editing a file and I was seeing no change at all. Like that time in class when I was editing the wrong file, right? I remember that I had the 2 identically named files. It was a moment like that, and then I decided that that there was something.
So yeah, we had to do like a
yeah.
And then do Android film. So there was that like extra.
Right. I see. Right, right. I see. Any other thing that I can do, or any question at all?
Where will the signups be
Sorry?
Where will the signups be? For our app?
Will be the sign up
Yeah.
on a form I will build. You know, Google Forms.
Okay.
I will do it in that way so that I can give you a column for like the title of your project, how much time you want, which day you prefer, etc., etc. All these kind of things. Okay. Um, well,
Are we gonna have like access to the projector for slides and things like that?
Yeah.
Or we just kind of live demo.
no, I will give you. You know, you will be here essentially doing it in the same way I'm doing this presentation. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if there are no other questions. We can close, but.
What kind of things do you want to cover?
So I want to tell me, you know, describe the app, demo it by showing how it works, and then say a little bit about how you implemented it. So what were the difficulties and what were the interesting things you did? Okay. My goal is that I want to understand from the presentation really what you did, and then I will check the code to see how well the code is written, whether I would be able to make sense of it, etc., etc. But I should have a good idea of what the code is doing at that point. So. Let me know also, I will make a, so does anyone of you need anything special to be up and running for the demos or anything special? If so, tell me, but also do you have now any idea that you will need a special setup or internet? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I only have this router though, so I'll remember. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm still staying here 10 minutes if you want to ask me questions individually, but let me close the Hangout.
I'm not sure how we can really. I guess we can record